Whether they like it or not, they're never getting rid of it.
What happens when your franchise savior becomes the reason it all falls apart? For Marvel, the Fantastic Four reboot was more than just another movie. It was supposed to be the clean slate, the comeback project that would restore fan faith after years of misfires and declining hype. A new cast, a $200 million budget, and at the center of it all, Pedro Pascal, beloved, respected, the man who could carry a galaxy in The Mandalorian and bring emotional depth to any role he touched. But behind the scenes, that dream has reportedly unraveled into something Marvel never saw coming.
It's been a dream to join the MCU. The movie is called The Fantastic Four. I'll confess, I did all my stretching for real.
A crisis so serious, it triggered cast walkouts, PR cover-ups, and a studio scrambling to hide the damage. Insiders claim Pedro Pascal didn't just join the cast. He tried to take over the film, rewriting scenes, challenging the director, and turning a team-driven movie into what one crew member called a personal therapy session wrapped in spandex.
He won't leave me alone.
How did the crown jewel of Marvel's next phase become its biggest liability? What really happened inside that rehearsal room that made every major cast member walk? And why are Marvel executives allegedly panicking behind closed doors while trying to spin a happy narrative in public? If you think you've heard it all, trust me, you haven't. Let's rewind the story to the beginning, before the interviews went awkward, before the script rewrites, before the fan theories exploded, and break down exactly how Marvel's most anticipated reboot fell apart from the inside out. Marvel needed a win, badly. After back-to-back disappointments, lukewarm sequels, overcrowded Disney Plus shows, and box office fatigue, the studio was staring down the uncomfortable reality that even its most loyal fans were starting to tune out. The Fantastic Four reboot was supposed to change that, and on paper, it looked like the perfect comeback. Vanessa Kirby, class, range, and a rising prestige star as Sue Storm. Joseph Quinn, fresh off his breakout in Stranger Things, bringing Gen Z hype as Johnny Storm. Ebon Moss-Bachrach, the scene stealer from The Bear, cast as the rugged and witty Ben Grimm. And then, the big get, Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards, the brilliant, tortured leader of the group. Marvel had finally landed its grown-up Tony Stark replacement. With a $200 million budget and a script that promised to blend action, intelligence, and emotional stakes, this wasn't just a reboot. It was a reset button for the MCU. Fans were ecstatic. Marvel's online announcement racked up tens of millions of views. Edits of the cast went viral overnight. Stan Twitter was already calling it the most perfectly cast MCU lineup since Phase 1. But what no one knew, at least not yet, was that this house of hype was built on quicksand. Because while the public was celebrating, whispers were already surfacing that all was not well behind the scenes. Sources close to the production claim that even during early rehearsals, clashes began to surface. Not over costumes or fight scenes, but over control. Specifically, how much control one actor would have over the direction, tone, and heart of the movie. And that actor, you guessed it, Pedro Pascal. Insiders say the initial chemistry read, meant to lock in the team dynamic, fell off. While the rest of the cast embraced the ensemble spirit, Pascal reportedly started pushing early notes about making Reed Richards less comic book, more philosophical. That might not sound alarming until you realize how quickly that creative input turned into a takeover. The cast didn't see it coming. Marvel didn't see it coming. But by the time they all sat down for the final script table read, everything would change. It was supposed to be the moment where everything clicked. The final table read, the full cast, the director, key Marvel execs all gathered in a private studio space, was meant to unify the vision, set the tone. This was how Marvel launched its best films in the past, with energy, cohesion, and team chemistry. Instead, it reportedly turned into a silent war zone. According to multiple insiders, Pedro Pascal arrived at the table read with a heavily marked up script. Not just a few tweaks or questions, but pages of handwritten rewrites, dialogue changes, scene restructuring, even new character beats that hadn't been approved. At first, the rest of the cast thought he was joking, but then Pascal started performing the changes out loud. In the middle of the session, lines rewritten to shift focus onto Reed Richards' internal struggles, his trauma, his emotional arc. And as one source put it stopped being a Fantastic Four movie. It became the Pedro Pascal show. Director Matt Shakman, known for his measured, collaborative style, tried to redirect the flow. He asked Pascal to stick to the agreed script. That's when things got tense. Pascal reportedly pushed back, openly, in front of the full cast and crew. He questioned the direction, challenged notes, even cut off a fellow actor mid-feedback. A witness recalled Vanessa Kirby sitting still, arms crossed, her jaw clenched. Joseph Quinn and Ebon Moss-Bachrach kept exchanging glances. Is this really happening? The look on their faces seemed to say. And then came the line that would change everything. One crew member claimed Pascal turned to the director and said, "If this is just going to be another cookie-cutter Marvel flick, then I'm wasting my time." Boom. Silence. Nobody said a word. Nobody needed to. The vibe in the room was scorched. And by the end of that session, the damage was done. The cast walked. All of them. Not in a dramatic outburst, but with quiet finality. According to insiders, it was their way of saying, "We're out, we didn't sign up for this." Marvel execs were stunned. Emergency calls were placed to Disney leadership that same evening, and from that moment forward, the Fantastic Four reboot stopped being a dream project and started becoming Marvel's biggest PR nightmare. Once the cast walked out of that now infamous table read, Marvel's leadership expected tension, but not a mutiny. What they didn't realize was that this wasn't the first time Pedro Pascal had stepped outside the lines. It was just the first time people stopped pretending not to notice. According to multiple production insiders, Pascal had been pushing his vision for the film long before the table read imploded. What started as thoughtful creative suggestions slowly turned into something much more controlling, a steady takeover of the story, tone, and focus. It began with the rewrites, small things at first, minor tweaks to Reed Richards' dialogue, a few more monologues, adjusted scene transitions. But soon, sources say Pascal started requesting full scene restructures, particularly in moments that originally highlighted other characters, like Sue Storm's leadership, Johnny Storm's humor, or Ben Grimm's emotional depth. In one early draft, Sue had a defining moment during a high-stakes moral decision. In Pascal's version, that scene was rewritten to instead explore Reed Richards' trauma and inner turmoil, a trend that, according to crew members, began appearing over and over again. He didn't just want to play the lead, one source put it, he wanted to rewrite the movie around him. And it wasn't just the script. Behind the scenes, Pascal allegedly began pushing for changes to costume designs, lighting tones, camera angles, even background dialogue. Nothing was too small to touch, and everything slowly but surely began to orbit around one gravitational center, his version of Reed Richards. Director Matt Shakman reportedly tried to hold the line. Known for his thoughtful, collaborative process, Shakman had managed chaos before. He directed WandaVision after all. But this time, every attempt to steer the ship was met with what insiders describe as philosophical resistance. Pascal allegedly argued that Marvel's formula had grown stale, that this film couldn't be just another superhero flick. He wanted to inject depth, commentary, darkness. He wanted it to mean something. And to some people, that didn't sound unreasonable. To others, it sounded like ego disguised as vision. There's a difference between creative passion and a power trip, said one crew member. This wasn't about pushing the story forward, it was about pulling it toward him. Even the on-set energy changed. Some insiders described it as walking on eggshells. Pascal's moods reportedly swung, funny and generous one day, short-tempered and dismissive the next. What was supposed to be a collaborative ensemble film now felt like a one-man show, with everyone else trying to tiptoe around the star's ambitions. And soon, that tension wouldn't just stay behind closed doors. You didn't need an insider badge to feel something was off. All you had to do was watch the press interviews. They were supposed to be light, fun, a victory lap before filming. But the moment the Fantastic Four cast hit the promotional trail, something felt wrong. Clips from early group interviews started popping up online, and fans noticed the cracks immediately. Pedro Pascal would dominate every question, steering answers back to his deep, emotional interpretation of Reed Richards. What was meant to be a fun chat about the cast dynamics slowly turned into a TED Talk on trauma and identity. Vanessa Kirby sat with her classic poise, but her polite smiles didn't reach her eyes. Joseph Quinn chuckled nervously through most of it, at one point joking, "He won't leave me alone." At the time, fans laughed, but in hindsight, it felt like a cry for help hidden behind banter. One now viral interview clip showed Pascal interrupting Vanessa mid-answer to go on a tangent about how superhero films need to reflect the broken systems of the real world. Kirby, visibly annoyed, leaned back in her seat, stealing a glance at Joseph, who responded with an awkward half-smile and a muttered, "Yikes." And the internet caught everything. Clips flooded Reddit and TikTok, frame-by-frame breakdowns of side-eyes, posture shifts, barely suppressed eye rolls. One comment racked up thousands of likes. You can literally feel the discomfort coming through the screen. Even Eben Moss-Bachrach, usually stone-faced and professional, was caught subtly shaking his head as Pascal launched into a speech about transcending the superhero genre. It stopped being subtle. It started becoming a pattern. Insiders say Marvel's PR team jumped into damage control fast. Interview topics were quietly restricted. Press appearances were shortened or canceled altogether. A few media outlets even reported that Disney's internal marketing team issued direct notes. Avoid hot topics. Keep Pascal on message. No creative talk. But by that point, it was too late. The footage was already out there. Fans had already seen the awkward glances, the forced smiles, the weird vibe. And like a bloodhound on a scent, the internet wasn't about to let go. The question now wasn't just what's going on, it became how bad is it really? Because if the cast couldn't fake chemistry on a press tour, what was happening when the cameras weren't rolling? Pedro Pascal's rise to stardom has been nothing short of meteoric. From Game of Thrones to The Mandalorian, he became Hollywood's unlikely heartthrob, the internet's favorite soft boy, a man hailed as emotionally intelligent, humble, soul, socially conscious. TikTok dubbed him Hollywood's baby girl. Twitter praised his activism, his sensitivity, his charm. But according to people behind the scenes, the version of Pedro Pascal you see on screen and online isn't the same one who showed up to lead Marvel's most ambitious reboot. Multiple insiders describe a dramatic shift once production kicked into high gear. At first, Pascal was warm, collaborative, and easy to work with. But as the project progressed, his behavior reportedly turned more intense, more focused on control than connection. He was friendly in public, no doubt, one crew member recalled. But the second we got to rehearsals or pre-shoot meetings, it stopped being a conversation. It became a lecture. And it wasn't just about the script or his character's arc. Pascal allegedly inserted himself into costume meetings, shot planning, even background design. What should have been handled by entire departments became points of debate, often led by Pedro himself. He had notes for everything, another source shared, not feedback, directives, as if no one else had spent years working on this project before he arrived. And then there were the boundary issues. On camera, Pascal's affectionate nature seemed harmless. Playful touches, lingering hugs, casual physical closeness. But according to whispers from inside the production, not everyone was comfortable with it. One red carpet moment sparked particular backlash. A photo where Pascal's hand lingered low on Vanessa Kirby's hip, leading to an online debate about what crosses the line between friendly and invasive. Some fans defended him. Others asked, if this were a different actor, would we be so forgiving? Behind closed doors, those same questions reportedly started bubbling up among the cast. What was brushed off early on as just Pedro being Pedro began to feel, in the words of one insider, like a shield. His public image made it impossible to challenge him without looking like the problem. Even his activism, something typically celebrated by fans, became a point of tension on set. Pascal would often speak passionately about representation, emotional depth, and using superheroes as vehicles for real-world messaging. But the way he delivered that message, insiders say, felt less like collaboration and more like domination. He talked a lot about justice and voice, a source close to the cast said, but then he'd shut down the very people he was working with. By the time press tour started, the divide was impossible to hide. The warm persona was still there for the cameras. But when the mics were off, it felt like no one in the cast was really on the same page anymore. And the final breaking point wasn't dramatic or public, it was quiet, private, and irreversible. In an attempt to salvage the Unraveling production, Marvel organized one final meeting, a last-ditch effort to bring the cast and creative team together, to reset the tone and possibly move forward. It was a private Zoom call, scheduled without press, without executives, just the core cast, the director, and Pedro Pascal. Insiders say the vibe going in was cautious but hopeful. People wanted resolution, clarity, a reset, but instead, they got a monologue. Pascal reportedly opened the meeting by speaking for nearly 20 uninterrupted minutes. Not about the group, not about solutions, but about his vision, what the Fantastic Four should mean, what Reed Richards has to represent, and why Marvel needed to evolve. He spoke about trauma, identity, symbolism, tone. He criticized the studio's formulaic storytelling. He even referenced Stan Lee's original intentions, framing his own ideas as more authentic than the studio's vision. At first, the rest of the cast listened, but then Vanessa Kirby tried to respond. Calmly, respectfully, she began to offer a different perspective, and that's when Pascal, according to multiple sources, cut her off. It's not about hierarchy, Vanessa. It's about message. 4 words. That was it. The conversation, which had already been fragile, imploded. Joseph Quinn quietly left the call not long after. Vanessa followed. By the end, it was just Pascal and a few stunned faces still on the screen. And while Marvel never publicly commented, insiders say the decision was made that night. The original cast was done. No more team dynamic. No more Fantastic Four as it was originally planned. The fallout? Immediate. According to leaks, a recording of the call exists. And in that recording, Pascal allegedly questions Marvel's entire creative direction while dismissing the director's notes in front of the full cast. For a studio known for tight control and clean press, this was catastrophic. Marvel didn't just lose a cast, it lost control of the narrative. And as whispers of what really happened began leaking to press, Disney executives moved quickly into damage control mode. Their goal? Buy time, change the story, rebuild the reboot. But from that moment forward, one truth was clear. Marvel's most anticipated film had fallen apart before a single frame was even shot. The moment the cast walked away, Marvel went into full-blown emergency mode. Executives knew the story couldn't go public. Not yet. The studio that built its empire on clean PR, fan hype, and perfectly timed reveals was suddenly dealing with a nightmare they couldn't control. The Fantastic Four reboot was collapsing from the inside, and fans were starting to sense it. So, the plan? Delay, distract, and deflect. Internally, a 3-part strategy was reportedly drafted within 24 hours of the Zoom call. Fallout Step 1. Stall the story. Blame any scheduling shakeups on industry strikes, scheduling conflicts, or creative revisions. Make sure no cast departure looks like a scandal. Nothing to see here, just the usual Hollywood juggling act. Step 2. Quietly replace the cast. Instead of announcing a recast, Marvel's plan is to slide in new actors through the multiverse. Introduce alternate versions of the Fantastic Four in post-credit scenes, animated episodes, or variant cameos across other MCU films. That way the switch looks intentional, planned, not a desperate save. Step 3. Sideline Pedro Pascal without firing him. Publicly cutting ties with Pascal would be risky. He's still adored by millions, but insiders say Marvel's new strategy is to limit limit his involvement, give him minor cameos in other properties, but strip him of any influence or leadership role. One executive was reportedly quoted as saying, "We thought we were getting the next Robert Downey Jr., but we got a podcast in a spandex suit." Harsh? Maybe. But behind the scenes, Marvel's leadership was facing a terrifying realization. One of their most hyped films was already gone before it was born. And worse, the fans were catching on. Social media lit up with speculation, Reddit threads with hundreds of comments, TikToks dissecting press interviews frame by frame, tweets asking why Fantastic Four updates had gone radio silent. Marvel, once the master of the long game, suddenly found itself playing defense. The problem wasn't just a cast, it wasn't just Pedro, it was reputation. And that's something even the multiverse might not be able to reset. As Marvel scrambled to contain the fire, a deeper, more uncomfortable truth was surfacing. Their brand was no longer bulletproof. This wasn't just a one-time production issue. It was a symptom of something bigger, a slow erosion of the carefully polished image Marvel had spent over a decade building. Behind the scenes, executives were now asking tough questions. Have we given stars too much power? Is the multiverse fixing problems, or just covering them up? Can Marvel still guarantee quality, or just content? And then came the real twist. The other cast members started winning. While Marvel panicked, the original Fantastic Four lineup was thriving. Vanessa Kirby landed a major lead in an upcoming Christopher Nolan film. Joseph Quinn signed a multi-film deal with Warner Brothers. Eben Moss-Bachrach is reportedly being courted for an A24 psychological drama. They've said nothing publicly. No tweets, no interviews, just silence. But that silence says everything. Insiders claim Disney's top brass tried to quietly reconnect with the cast after the fallout, testing the waters, maybe even pitching a second chance. But the answer, allegedly, was simple: no. Walking away from the MCU isn't a small move, one industry insider noted. You only do that when you've decided the project and the person leading it aren't worth the chaos. And as for Pedro Pascal, he hasn't addressed the situation directly, but his social media presence has taken a noticeable turn. Cryptic captions, misunderstood artist energy, the kind of posts that invite fans to defend him, not question him. Some studios are still interested, but others worried. Is he becoming too polarizing to be bankable? That's the real danger, because in Hollywood, you're either the face of the franchise or the reason it falls apart. The Fantastic Four reboot was supposed to be Marvel's return to greatness. Instead, it's become a cautionary tale, not just about one actor's alleged ego or a cast that refused to stay silent, but about something bigger. Who really controls the stories we see on screen? Is it the actors, the executives, the fans? Pedro Pascal may have believed he was elevating the character. The cast believed he was derailing the entire project. Marvel believed they could fix it without anyone noticing. But now, we all know. And as the dust settles, one question still lingers like a post-credit scene Marvel forgot to write. What happens when the superhero story becomes the scandal? Because one thing's for sure, this isn't over. So what do you think? Was Pedro Pascal out of line, or was he fighting for something bigger than the studio could handle? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because the next chapter in this Marvel meltdown might be even messier.